Good day, grade 5. This is our second language arts review, and this is the first time I'm going to try something like this on this sort of OneNote. I haven't done a language arts on OneNote before, but I thought today we kind of could actually use it. So this is in regards to our story that we just read. So we just read about the story of Balmung and Greyfell. So yeah, I think by now it's Tuesday, and you should have already completed all your reading through it and kind of getting the idea and working through most of the page. We haven't got to writing our own story yet. But so I wanted to provide you with an option or an opportunity here to see kind of the idea of how we would start crafting our own story. Now, I know we did this a bit before with the Beowulf, but I thought we could maybe improve our method here a bit more this time. So what are we going to do? First, right, we're just going to go through what are the different things that we're looking at here. So first we just want to kind of think, what was that story about again? Okay, so we'll just break it up as it does into parts, right? So part 1, right? What happened in part 1? Well, let's summarize it in just a few quick sentences, right? And you were supposed to do this. So, boy, his name is Siegfried, but we're just trying to keep our thing simple here. He grows up in a nice family, grows up in a nice family, right? They look out for him, they care about him, they make sure that he's going to be, fit for a life of usefulness, it says. So we can summarize it as a nice family, right? These guys care about him, they care about his future, care about him, right? And they want him to be successful. So that's part 1. And then what was something else that happens? Well, so he lived quite a nice life, right? We see all the stuff that he was, he had nice beds, and he was given all sorts of costly garments, and he got yummy food. But his parents didn't want him to live life like a holiday and the birds would sing in sunshine forever. They wanted him to know that, life has difficulties and trials. So they made sure that he knew the toil of life, right? So that's something his father was particularly interested in. His father says, so it says in the book or the story, but the business of man's life is not a mere pastime, and none knew this truth better than the wise old King Sigmund. And Sigmund said, all work is noble, and he said to Siegfried, and he who yearns to win fame must not shun toil. Even princes should know how to earn a livelihood by the labor of their hands. And because of that, because they want him to be like a strong and wise man, and also to know how to work hard, they send him to train under this guy called Regan. So, sent to train under Regan, right? E-G-I-N, Regan. So he was sent to train under Regan, who's a master smith, right? He learns how to labor with his own hands, and he leaves this life of ease. It's a life of toil, you could say, right? It's a life of toil, right? It says in the book that he was he switched. He no longer had the nice bed. He had a straw heap in the corner. He had no nice clothing. He rather had coarse clothing. Coarse, the word coarse means like rough. So most of our clothes today are quite soft and you don't feel it. But if you've ever worn like a wool sweater or something on like a short sleeve shirt, you might know a little bit more about what coarse is. So a lot of people would wear, or regular people would wear coarser clothes because they didn't have the fine machinery that we have today. So he changed all that, and he had a humble fare. So a humble fare would be like a nice, easy to eat meal, or not easy, but like a simpler meal. So you can imagine he went from having nice banquets with all sorts of chickens and sauces and cakes to, having some cheese and bread, or something like that. Maybe a little piece of chicken. But yeah, and so anyways, he goes there. And he becomes a great smith, right? He becomes a great smith. So becomes a great smith. So that is part 1 of our story, right? This is part 1. And so now we're kind of piecing together. This generally could tell you the what happens, right? He grows up in a nice family. This family cared about him, so they sent him to train under Reagan so he could learn how a life of trial. And he becomes a great smith, right? And he learns lots. Plus, learns lots, right? So he becomes a great smith and he learns lots. So then we get to part 2. What happens in part 2? Well, part 2, we see that he wants to become a hero. Wants to be a hero, wants an adventure, right? A lot of us kind of want that. I know when I was growing up, I really wanted to join the army, and I almost did. But then, life changed. But wants to be a hero. And so he wants to go on an adventure. Go on an adventure, right? That's a great thing to want to do, right? To go on an adventure. It's good. So he wants to go on an adventure. So he asks for a sword. And so this is kind of part of this part. Asks for a sword to be made, right? A sword. So he wants something to be made for him to help him on his great adventure. So he asks for the sword. And then Reagan makes these swords, right? Reagan's a really good smith, but I think, obviously Siegfried wants a really, really good sword because he's going to try and he wants it to be able to cut through an anvil. So if you don't know what an anvil is, it's the sort of thing that, a blacksmith would build his stuff on, right? He would have his big hammer here, and he would smash the sword while he's making the sword. He would hit it, right, to make it harder and to kind of make it all even out. So it's a big piece of metal that you use to smash, to fix other things and to work things on. And the idea is that it is strong. So he wants a sword so strong that it'll break right through it and chop right through it. So Reagan builds these lovely swords. He works hard, and then, but each sword breaks. Reagan's swords fail, right? And then then he goes off, and he's like, he's probably a bit sad at this point. Oh, that's our bathroom break. I turned that one back on for a bit. So anyways, that's our that's our bathroom break. Where were we? Yeah, so he goes back home, and he actually gets the sword from his dad or his family, right? And so he gets a sword from his family, his dad's sword. He reforges his dad's sword. So dad's sword reforged, right? So I don't know if you've ever watched Lord of the Rings, but in Lord of the Rings this is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if this is because Tolkien really liked these old legends, so he might have actually copied this, right? In some sense, this old sword that Aragon had, I think it was called, or it becomes Andruil. It was called something else before. Anyways, the sword is broken in 2 pieces, and they have to reforge it, and then it becomes this great sword, right? The sword was reforged, and it becomes a great sword, and the sword will be called Balmung, right? Balmung. So it's a great sword, and then we get to part 3, right? I stopped using Roman numerals. Hilarious. Okay, so he cuts. Oh yeah, and he cuts the anvil in half with the sword, and he also cuts some wool just that's floating through the water, right? So you can see it's going slow. Normally, if something's going slow, it's not as easy to cut, but because the sword is so sharp, it cuts right through the wool. So that's pretty intense. So now he wants to go on the adventure, right? He wants this adventure. He's ready. He's got a sword, right? So now he wants to go. So he wants to say, where should I go? Wants adventure. And he's sent. So he's sent to this guy called Grippier, right? And Grippier is the last of the giants. So we'll say last of giants. So we see here he goes to the lot, and then so he goes over to the giants, and then so there's a whole bunch of things going through that, and those things in between you should remember when you write your own story, right? You want to have that in between. You can't just say, oh, he arrived instantly. That's not how a story goes. Often the story doesn't go and take you, well, he took one step and there was a bird and then there was worm, but there wants to be some things. So he was going through the hills and all that stuff. So we hear all that, but the next big part is where he goes to Grippier, and Grippier offers him, right? Grippier offers a steed, a mighty war steed, right? So that's great from his pasture, and then he goes down, and then the boy, boy gets this horse called Greyfell, and it's offered to him by Odin, right? Gets Greyfell from Odin, right? Because like that stranger with the one eye, we haven't really learned of this, but Odin has just one eye. So we'll learn about that soon in our Viking unit. But yeah, Odin just has one eye. He traded it for like wisdom. So yeah. So when you see a one-eyed stranger in old tales, that's normally Odin. So the boy gets Greyfell basically from Odin in a sense. It's from Grippier and Odin. Odin makes him select the best horse, which is Greyfell. And so then he goes off, and then he's there. We'll probably do one more story where he gets to enjoy or use this Greyfell horse. So that is cool, right? Now let's start our own story, right? You know all the characters. I suppose you've written down the characters there, so I don't need to go into them again on our own. So what we want to first do when we're creating our own story. So this is my... Oh, can this actually work? My story, right? So we're making our own story here, and the first thing we want is to go and say, well, what is the setting? Where is my story happening? So I'm going to go through just some idea of my own, and then I want you to make your own version of this, right? So do your own thing. Now you can kind of use some of my ideas, but that's fine. But I want you to kind of follow the same sort of pattern. So I'm going to set it. I want to set mine in space. I love space stories. I always loved Star Wars and Star Trek and the Mandalorian show I just watched. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to set it though in our solar system. You know why I'm going to do that? Because I kind of know some things about our solar system that I don't know about other solar systems. So if I had to do it in a different solar system, I would probably have to research some things or make up a lot more stuff. Here, I can just do it. Now I'm going to set it in 2200, right? So way from 2020. We're going to do 2200. So we'll see if that's an any better of a year when we get there. But yeah, so our system, and the reason is I kind of want it to be a little bit more advanced technology. So my idea, but not like ridiculous, super far in the future, but kind of close by where things are somewhat similar. But yeah, there's more technology, and some of the things that people are talking about today might be happening. So that's the idea. So I also want like there to be like ease of travel generally. I'm not going to talk about this much in my story, but there's going to be ease of travel between systems, right? So there's spaceships basically, or like spaceships that anyone, like average people can have, or regular people can have. Like today basically only a country can have a spaceship. So ease of travel between worlds is really important for my story. This is kind of just going to come up. I'm not really going to talk about it much, but yeah, it'll be with engines and solar sails and stuff. So you can fill out a sheet, right, when you're thinking solar sails plus hyper engines, you could call them, right? Hyper engines. So this is just me sort of imagining what my world will be like. Now I'm thinking my combat in my ship, because part of our story has to do with combat. Even though there's no real fighting, there is a sword made. So I'm gonna also have to think about what kind of combat would be happening in my story, and we might want to use these same characters later in a different story that we make. So I'm gonna do combat is often close quarters because I want them to be able to forge something, right? Because I'm gonna kind of copy the same story. So combat will be close quarters. So close quarters just means it is like you're close enough to each other to hit each other with something blunt and heavy. So close quarters, but maybe maybe blasters too. Blasters as well. No lightsabers in my world. And then I also thought, okay, so it's going to be on. He's going to start his time on the planet of Europa, right? Europa. So for me, Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter, and it is kind of an icy world, right? Icy. I guess I could do icy world, right? It's an icy world. And perfect. And then I think there's going to be just one other location because he's going to travel. He's going to travel to Jupiter, right? So not too far, but he's going to travel there ultimately. And yeah, that's going to be kind of what the setting is, right? So it's always good to kind of get your idea of where is your thing taking place. So now I can just add another page here. So we've got our setting done. Now I want to figure out who my characters are. Just even if I'm just getting the names, right? So I'm going to have the first guy we called Sven. He's going to be my Siegfried character. He's a young noble. A young noble from Europa, right? So Europa, the little planet there. Let's capitalize that. Europa. So he's a young noble from Europa. So basically very similar. The parents, they're going to be just a duke, a duchess. Duke plus duchess. So yeah, they're going to have very similar characteristics like king and queen from the last one. Instead, I'm going to have this guy called Christian he's going to be the forge or the master smith. He's going to be a smith as well, and he works at the forge. So works at the forge. So while you're watching this, I want you guys also to be thinking about what your characters are going to be like. And so remember, see how close I'm keeping this? There's a master smith. There's a young noble. His parents are nobility. And when I get to the plot, I'm also going to keep it very similar, right? And then we're also going to have this guy, Alexis. So this part is kind of where I probably go a little bit closer. He's going to be Alexis the second. This guy is the last of the Muskites. I'm going to call them Muskites, and he is the owner of Tesla Corp, right? So he's the owner of Tesla Corp, and so this guy, he's going to be the guy that I go and get my ship from ultimately, or that Sven rather. Sven is going to start to take on your character. So Sven is going to go to Alexis to get the ship ultimately. He goes to Kristen first, and then he goes to Alexis afterwards. And then I'm going to have this last one called the Elon bot, who is going to give, who's going to point out old or powerful ship. So point out a powerful ship, which will be, and I'm actually going to call the ship Gray Wing. Keeping it close, keeping it simple, easy to notice the similarities, right? So this is my character. These are my characters. Now I can go into designing my plot, right? So do the exact same thing kind of as you did way up here, right? You want to get these parts. So design your plot by making these parts. So similar things, right? So I'm going to go with part 1, right? Part 1. Sven grows up in loving family. In loving family. So that, and then when I write my story, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with this, and I'm going to add some details, right? I'm going to add some details. Oh, they wanted him, he was the best at his maths and his sciences, and he knew his geography very well. He was also really good at sledding, and I don't know, you can make up some other sports, hyperboarding or something like that. And he had the best shot in his out of all the young boys young boys or whatever. And so that could be the first part there that I start with. And then the next thing I'm going to say here is he is sent to Christian for training, right? For training. And again, the idea here, which I'll get, is that it's for toil, right? He's going to learn how to work with his hands, right? He's had a pretty fun life, and now he's going to learn how to do hard work. Is going to be the big thing. And then I can talk a bit about his time there, right? That'll be in my story. I'm not going to write all this down right now, though. If you want, you could actually do this, where you write the basic thing, then you put a few points of what's going to happen there, and then you slowly build up the bigger story, which this is a great way to kind of organize your story, right? So you start pulling up the details here, put up the details here, and then you get the big point. But first write out the big points. I think that's always a good thing, so you can kind of organize your thing. And so then Sven becomes great smith. Becomes a great smith is probably better. Becomes a great smith, right? So this is very, very similar to this. Almost exactly the same, right? He becomes a great smith, learns a lot. It's exactly the same. I'm not getting too creative, though it is going to be a whole different story because I've changed the setting and changed the characters. And maybe the characters will have some slightly different tricks on it, but you can see the other story clearly in my story here. So part 2, what's going to happen? So he wants to become a hero. Wants to be a hero. Be a hero, right? He wants to be a hero. He asks for this guy to build armor. Asks for battle armor. That's going to be mine. So instead of a sword, I'm going to get battle armor. It's going to be forged. Battle armor. But it's still kind of weapony because he's going to use a blaster and the battle armor will protect him, right? And so and then the next part, and remember you can put the details of how that goes, why he wants this battle armor. Next big part is that Christian's armor fails, right? So the Christian's armor is going to fail. And you know how in the other one it was smashing against it? Maybe this time I'm just going to blast it with the blaster, right? Blaster fire. And it's going to break under the blaster fire. And so Christian goes home, Sven goes home. Sven gets the old armor, gets, father's armor, and he restores it. And here, this is going to work. This restores it. And this one is going to work well, right? So that's going to be the big part. And this one you could just say works or something just to keep you understanding here what's going on. So this is part 2, right? We've just got through most of part 2. Now we just want to do quickly part 3 here. Part 3. And there we'll have him go off, right? So he's going to go, so he gets sent to Alexis the second. Put the second. Anyways, he's going to be Alexis the second. And Alexis offers, so Alexis basically, Tesla, if you don't know, is a big, today it's like a very futuristic kind of electronic cars sort of thing. So Tesla Corp In my story, they're going to have spaceships, right? So they're futuristic spaceships now. They changed once space travel, and already, and you can get into the whole story. Tesla actually has is kind of owned by the same guy who does SpaceX, and they've got the rockets to like land, so they're already doing some space stuff. So that's why I think it could be kind of realistic. But anyway, so Alexis offers him any ship, right? So this is the next big part, and you can, right, when you write this, you're going to talk about like the journey, right? So in my case, maybe he, goes through and he's seeing all the beautiful colors of Jupiter and whatnot. So he has to go around, and he maybe passes a few moons of the other moons. But maybe I'll write the actual story tomorrow. So Alexis offers any ship, and maybe to spice it up, any ship plus battle bots, right? So we'll get he has some battle bots, not like battle bots or things, but like, droids from like in Star Wars, droids, just to maybe 20 droids, just to help him in any of his battles, so that's a big help, right? A ship and some droids maybe to help run the ship and everything. And then the stranger, who instead I'm calling Elon Bot. He points out Grey Wing, this great ship. So, and then here you go, you have the story basically, right? So I hope that wasn't too boring. I know it was a little bit long, and it's harder for me to write on this tablet-y thing, but I hope you could kind of understand everything and follow everything. So this is what I want you to do today. I want you to go through, I want to make sure that you've done your part, right? You've done this part of the work. And today what you're going to do is, like on the pages, the actual pages that you're supposed to print out, now what I want you to do is set up your setting, right? I want your setting, right? You can write it out just like this. It doesn't have to be too complicated, right? Remember, setting is where it's taking place, and you can also do when, right? Where and when. So, right, our solar system, 2020, where and when. And then I have Jupiter, Europa. That's kind of where my story is going to take place. And this is really good because you need to know what's happening, right? If my story is taking place in a hole under the ground, it's going to be a lot different than in our solar system by Europa and Jupiter. So that's really important, where and when. And then these are some extra details, like, different things that are going on at the time, right? So if I'm doing a story in the 1700s, I might have muskets instead of blasters, right? Or something like that. So, and then I have my characters, right? And they're all going to be very similar to the characters in this. Now I can give them some different traits, but generally they're going to follow the same line with different names. And then the story itself is going to follow very closely to what our story is in the pages we read. So anyways, I hope you had fun reading the story. I hope you have fun making your story. So today I want you guys all to work on making sure that you kind of outline your story. You don't have to actually start writing your story yet, but I want you to outline your story. Okay, anyways, have a good time. And remember, just to be real clear, we are not making our own story about whatever. You are making a story that looks very, very similar to the story we read, okay? So don't go and make any other story. I need to be able to see very, very clearly that this story is following the same track as the Balmung and Greyfell story. So if I don't see very big similarities, that's gonna be, or if it's hard for me to see similarities, then that's not gonna get it. So make sure your similarities are obvious, like, so no one can miss them, right? And also just make this outline. And I think if you make this outline and your outline looks very similar, that's great. So please send in the outline so I can look at it quickly. I'm not going to mark it much, but I'm going to just see, and if I see that you're on the wrong track, I might reach out to you. So anyways, thank you for watching. Bye-bye for now.